today's video is going to be kind of a how-to of a detail strip of the Ruger Mark III 22-45 pistol. First thing we're going to do, of course, is make sure the pistol is clear and free of ammunition. See if I can show you guys that. Nothing in the chamber. Alright, so once we have that, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and pull the trigger. Once you have pulled the trigger, the first thing to do is to eject the magazine. I like to use a spent 223 cartridge because it just makes things a little bit simpler. You can rotate that up. Pull that right out. If yours is a new gun, might take a hammer to knock that loose. Next thing we're going to do is remove the bolt. And then push forward on the upper. That'll free it from the lower. Next thing we're going to do is remove the grip panels from both sides of the gun. Alright, so once you have the grips off, the next step is to remove the hammer assembly. And for that, you're going to need a pick and a punch. So there's a small spring in here that retains your hammer pin, so you're just going to push that toward the back of the receiver. And then from the other side of the frame, you're going to use your punch and push that pin out. You'll know when you get it right because it pops out very easily. Set that to the side. Pull our punch back out. Now this part can be a little fiddly. Sometimes the hammer doesn't like to move out easily. Sometimes it does. That time it moved free just fine. And what you can see is it's a 4-part array. You get the magazine disconnect bar, magazine disconnect spring, hammer, and hammer strut. The last component to remove from the firearm before you get to the trigger is the sear. A lot of times that'll just fall out. If it doesn't, you can just push it right out. It's not really held in there with any tension. Turn the gun up, and your sear and sear spring fall out. Okay, so the parts that are remaining in your frame at this point are the disconnector. So you can rotate that up and pull out the plunger and spring there. And then your safety selector will just fall right out because that was held in place by the hammer pin. The next step in the process is to remove the trigger assembly. In order to do that, again, you're going to need a punch. In fact, you'll need 2 for this one. There's a small spring. You can kind of see it right runs along there. You're going to push that down because that retains your pin that holds your trigger pin. And then you're going to push your trigger pin through. If you do it right, it'll move freely. Apparently I'm not doing it right. There we go. At that point your trigger assembly can come out. And your slide stop, if you want, you can also remove that. The first step of reassembly is obviously the exact opposite of disassembly. First thing we're going to do is take our slide stop lever, insert it back into the frame. The best way I've found to do that is to take the long leg of the lever, insert it through the hole in the frame into the trigger guard, find the notch in the frame for the lever itself, and then everything rotates into place. You're going to take your trigger pin, insert it part way through the hole, and then you're ready to install your trigger and disconnector. Insert your trigger and disconnector into your frame. You're going to have to manipulate the trigger a little bit to get that hole to line up. There we go. Okay. Now, the next step, you're going to have to push that spring back down in order to get the pin all the way through. There you go. The next step to reassembling your frame is going to be installing your sear spring and sear. First things first, we'll install the sear spring. So this is your sear spring. It's got a short leg and a long leg. The short leg here is going to go inboard of the frame, long leg outboard. There is a small notch in the frame. You can kind of see it right there. That small notch right there, that's where that curve in the spring is going to sit. So you just set that right in there like that. You guys can see that. Then you're going to take your sear spring. This time the notch is going to face the left side of the gun. You're just going to insert it through the hole and skewer that spring. Okay? Once you have that in place, you're going to insert your sear. This is your sear. It is asymmetrical. Well, you can see the way it's sitting in my hand. This is going to be the left side, and over here, this is going to be on the right side of the gun. So, I have that sear spring skewered inside the frame. I'm just going to move that to where it's barely hanging on. I don't know if you guys can see that because it's kind of dark inside the frame. And I'm going to insert the sear. And I have the sear 100% in there. I'm going to leave the forceps on my sear and rotate it forward. What this is doing is making it a lot easier for the next step of assembly. I'm going to take my hammer pin, and with that I'm going to take this spring right here and I'm going to move it toward the rear of the frame and insert my hammer pin. That'll keep that sear spring under tension. The next step that you're going to do is you're going to take your safety lever. You're going to insert that into the frame, and then that pin is going to skewer that safety lever. You can see that there. So I still have the spring under tension and I have my safety lever skewered. At this point I can move the disconnector down and release tension from my sear. And that'll hold everything in place. And you can see here that the trigger now, if the disconnector is in the correct orientation, the trigger moves that sear. If the disconnector is down, it does not. Okay, now that I know I have the disconnector and sear in the right orientation, I'm going to move the disconnector back up. Let the sear go for 1 second. I'm going to insert the disconnector spring and plunger back into the trigger. Okay. There we go. Alright, so at this point in the assembly, you want to grab all 4 of your components for your hammer assembly, and you're going to reassemble them. The hammer bushing goes in from the left side of the hammer. There's this little retaining collar on there, so you're going to slide that in from the left so it stops. Flip it over, and then the spring goes next. The spring is going to go with the curved end facing to the right, and then the magazine disconnect lever is going to go in with its curved portion facing to the left, so it interfaces with that spring. Okay, so you're going to grab your hammer assembly with everything in the proper orientation. You see that bushing comes to the right side here. That is going to interface with your square hole in your disconnector, so that's how you're going to align that, and then it just pushes into the frame, and everything should go back behind the sear. You're just going to line up those holes and push the hammer pin through. If you encounter resistance on the hammer pin, you see it's not quite flush with the frame there, not a problem. You'll just grab your pick again and move that small spring from the disassembly, you'll remember. Move that out of the way and it slides right in. Once you have everything assembled, you can move the hammer back, make sure it locks in place. Pull the trigger to test the disconnect. does not move freely. And insert a mag, and then test again. Hammer falls. So we know we have the magazine disconnect installed correctly. We're going to test the disconnector now by pushing down on it while holding the trigger. You should hear it click. And then if I bring the hammer back, with the hammer still pushed, it should not move forward. The rest of the reassembly is pretty simple. We're just going to take our upper, reinstall the bolt. So with our hammer in the forward position like this, we're just going to take our upper, set it on there real gently, and then slide the upper back in place. Alright, so the last step of assembly, we're going to take our mainspring housing and reinsert that into the gun. Depending on how tight your gun is, this might require the force of a hammer. Or not. Then you can rotate it back into position. One thing you want to make sure you do is that you get the hammer strut in the right position. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tip the gun up, shake it around a little bit, and then try and close it again. Nope, didn't quite get it. What I'm trying to do is get the hammer strut to line up with the mainspring housing just the way I want it. I had to do that off camera, but as you can see now, it doesn't fit snug, or it doesn't fit smoothly like it used to. It needs a little bit of force to go in. Close my lever. Bolt cycles like it should. No mag in the gun. You can see magazine disconnect safety is doing its job. Insert a mag. Gun fires.